story. The close race in Ukraine's presidential election. Latest figures suggest Viktor Yanukovich is leading Iulia Timoshenko by less than 3%. But both hopefuls say they're sure of victory, and the blame game that was a permanent feature of the election campaign looks set to continue. Well, we can now cross live to our correspondent Sean Thomas, who is in Ukraine. Sean, we've got some initial results at the moment, so tell us a bit more about the reaction and how the two candidates responded to them.
Certainly. Well, the city of Kiev is just waking up, but the Central Election Committee has been hard at work all through the night. In fact, let me give you the latest numbers real quick. In fact, with more than 80% of the votes having been counted at this moment in time, Viktor Yanukovich has 48% of the vote, and less than 2% or less than 3% behind is Timoshenko with 46% of the vote. And of course, there's that against all option, which is people actively not supporting either of the candidates, and that has 4% of the vote right now, and that's with more than 80% having been counted. Also very interesting to point out, if you look at the central and western portion of Ukraine, very much in favor of Iulia Timoshenko, and if you look at the southern and eastern part of Ukraine, very much in favor of Viktor Yanukovich. There is a distinct line, and there is no crossing that line in terms of who voted for which side. Very, very interesting to point out. Now, both parties are saying that this is not over. In fact, Viktor Yanukovich is actually claiming victory, is already celebrating, is already making plans to come out into the streets and show that he has won the presidency. But Iulia Timoshenko is saying that this is not the case. It is not over until the official votes have been counted, and all of those votes have been counted. Now, so far, the votes that are coming out of the Central Election Commission here in Ukraine are a lot closer than the exit polls that we were hearing about last night immediately as soon as those polls had closed. So it has been a very interesting race, a very tight race, and Alexei Yarashevsky, our bureau chief here in Ukraine, has a closer look at this election.
From 8 o'clock in the morning, people flocked to polling stations nationwide. There had been fears over low turnout, but by midday more than half of eligible voters cast their ballots, thus making the voting valid. Amid what has been a nervous campaign, both candidates were calm and optimistic.
I voted for changes for the better, for stability and a powerful Ukraine.
I congratulate everyone on this demonstration of democracy, when people can easily express their will. I have just voted for a new Ukraine, a happy, powerful, beautiful European country.
A lot of efforts were made to secure a fair vote. Despite both camps accusing each other of falsifications, both local and international observers deemed the runoff transparent. Exit polls suggest Viktor Yanukovich's victory, something his opponent Iulia Timoshenko said was too early to call. Unlike on the night after the first round of the election, the feeling of triumph was missing here.
The split of 3% in the exit polls is within the margin of error. Everything will depend on how our team does, with the remaining votes yet to be counted. I urge all of you who are responsible for it, hold on to every protocol, every document and every vote, because one vote could change the future of Ukraine.
It was quite the opposite atmosphere in the camp of Viktor Yanukovich. When the presidential candidate took to the stage, he was greeted with a standing ovation. And the intro to his speech pretty much told the story.
I congratulate you and the whole of Ukraine with the victory in this vote. People wanted a change, and this election we have made a first step towards uniting our country.
The vote counting is underway, but the head of the Central Election Commission has already said that it may take longer than it did in the first time round. The Ukrainian presidential election saga will continue for some time, as it may take up to a week for the Central Election Commission to count all the votes. Meanwhile, the biggest question on everyone's minds is whether the losing candidate would be able to accept defeat and not take people onto the streets. Alexei Yarashevsky, RT, Kiev, Ukraine.
Well, Sean, as we can see, the campaign has been quite hard fought. But what about the election itself? Has there been any trouble or any irregularities observed?
Well, it's been very interesting. If you were here in Ukraine during Election Day, reports of everything seemed to be coming our way. Everything from death threats to bomb threats to even smoke grenades being thrown into one of the polling locations. But here are some of the highlights, if you will. First of all, in the very first hour as polls were opening, we saw protesters of half-naked women holding signs saying, "Stop raping Ukraine, stop selling our vote." The countdown to the war starts now, and basically making their message heard that they want some sort of a change. They don't want more of the same. It wasn't focused against any particular candidate, but in fact just saying we want change. Also, there was a report of an observer having found a pen with disappearing ink. What does that mean? It means that the people who would write down their vote, that vote would later disappear and then not be counted. And then again, there was also a body found of one of Iulia Timoshenko's local campaign managers, and this was in western Ukraine, was found at a polling station. And then also the paperwork and the ballot boxes and important documents from that polling station were deemed to be missing. They could not be found. Now, there's nothing been said that was foul play. That is under investigation right now, so we can't speculate as to the cause of death. It could have been natural, but then again, very suspicious circumstances. And then here's something very interesting. There was a psychiatric hospital, which was a polling location, and there were not enough ballots at that polling location for everybody to vote. In fact, even for the officials who were working at that polling location to vote. But there were also some patients at that hospital who had ballots printed for them. It was decided that the patients who were sick were not eligible to vote, but the people who could work there could use their ballots instead. Here's the interesting thing. The name of that hospital, by coincidence, is Yushchenko, but not named after the current president, Viktor Yanukovich, but more for a noted psychiatrist here in Ukraine, Alexander Yushchenko. So a very interesting twist indeed. Now, something interesting to point out. We had the opportunity to talk to some of the members of the observing groups that came here to make sure that this election was run fairly and safely. And they've said that pretty much the process has run the way it should run, very democratically, and that there have been a couple of glitches, but nothing really major to report. We should be expecting to hear more about their consolidated report later on. But rumors of about everything that could possibly happen yesterday were swirling all about Ukraine. Going back to revisit these numbers again, the latest polls with more than 80% of the electorate votes having been counted, Yanukovych with 48%, Timoshenko with 46%, and against all with 4%. This is interesting because, obviously, Yanukovych claiming victory, Timoshenko saying not over until the fat lady sings, really. But if experts were saying if this was less than 2%, it would be contested. And both parties have said that if it doesn't go in their favor, they would take it to the streets. So it remains to be seen with this tight margin that we're seeing right now. If it continues to remain this way, will this be a democratic election, or will it then be fought and contested the way it has been in the past?
All right, Sean, thanks very much indeed for bringing us all the twists and turns of the campaign and the election itself, and bringing us the latest from Kiev. Of course, we'll be keeping a close eye on what's happening there during the day. For the moment, Sean Thomas, thanks very much indeed.